So Fátima Doman, my friend and this great author and teacher that I respect very much. It's a great honor to have you with us here in Brazil for the Brazilian audience in the moment when we are launching your book, actually your first book, Strengths, Authentic Strengths, for the Brazilian public. I already told the Brazilian audience a lot about yourself in terms of your resume, all the achievements you've been doing all over, the world, because I know your company and your teachings are reaching the world. But I think we're very curious about your own authentic strengths. That would be very interesting to have you introduce yourself to us, telling us which are your major authentic strengths and how these strengths have helped you to become who you are and do what you do. Please.
Of course. So you're the first person, Luciano, who has asked me that question in an interview. Thank you for being so original. And when I think about my authentic strengths, my number one strength is gratitude. And I really see how I've developed gratitude over my life. Coming to the United States, my family was fleeing a war from Angola. That's why they immigrated. And I think that when you grow up with very little, you develop a real sense of gratitude for what you do have. And I think that has shaped me profoundly, my childhood experience in developing gratitude. I also, another one of my top strengths is social intelligence. So growing up in a large family and just really interacting with a lot of people, being around a lot of people, I think that I intuitively developed the ability to communicate with others and to relate to others, being surrounded by so many people. And I find great comfort and meaning in connection with other human beings. That's something that's really important to me as well. So social intelligence is one of my top strengths. And then one of my, another top strength is love. And that's really what drives me to do what I do. I feel that it's a literal, love is like a substance in the world. I mean, it's a power, it's a force to be reckoned with. And I have found that when people have extended genuine love and caring toward me, I want to give the best of myself. And sometimes we don't use the word love in organizations, and we're a little uncomfortable with talking about that. But I'm talking about just that pure intent, that genuine caring for the well-being of other people. And I think that when we encounter that at work, we really feel inspired to give our best work. And in life, in our relationships, we feel inspired to bring our best to our relationships when we know that the other really genuinely cares about what's best for not just themselves, but for the we. And so I find that that's very motivating to me. And I also bring that to my work. So everything that I do it because I really love doing it. I have a great passion for my work, and I want to make a difference in the lives of others. So those are some character strengths that really motivate me. Teamwork is another one of my highest, character strengths, and I find myself energized when I work with other people. And when we can share our best thinking, I find that, the creativity process for me is ignited with teamwork. When I work independently, for example, when I'm writing my books, sometimes that's a hard thing for me to do. Some people really like that alone time. And I'm not saying that I don't like alone time. I'm not saying I don't like alone time at all, because actually in COVID, I started to enjoy that solitude. But that's not how I was raised. I was raised around a lot of people. So it for me, being alone for very long periods of time, extended periods of time, can be a bit of a challenge. Although as I'm getting older, I'm learning to enjoy it more and more.
Wow, that was great. I think we learned so much about you just by you telling us a few strengths that you have. I know you have other strengths. Now, the title of the book, I know you can speak some Portuguese because you were born in Angola, right? And the name of your book here in Brazil is Forças Autênticas. Can you say that in Portuguese? Can you repeat that or not?
Sure. And I, of course, have an American accent on the
No problem.
Forças Autênticas.
Autênticas. Yes, excellent. So in a time when so many people are searching for techniques and strategies to go, to thrive in life, I find very important that the title of your book talks about authenticity. Because of course we go we very quickly we go to the strengths. The idea of strengths is very important in your book, but authenticity is the other half. We're talking about authentic strengths. So do you think that some people are, let's say, trying to use strengths that are not authentic, would be unauthentic strengths? Is there such a thing? I don't know. I just want you to think about it with us.
Again, another out of the box question from Luciano. So yeah, I do think sometimes we feel like we have to bring a persona to work, or even sometimes to our relationships. Sometimes we feel in order to fit in that we have to, kind of put on clothing that isn't really true to who we are, so to speak. So I think it's important to understand what our authentic strengths are. However, I'm not telling people to, change your career. If you're in a career that's not really reflective of who you are, quit your job. That's not the message at all. The message is to be more authentic in whatever you are doing, whenever possible. So the message is to develop an awareness of who you really are. Take the time to go inward and really discover what's important to you. Which of your character strengths really ignite passion and energy and engagement for you. Take the time to take the strengths inventory and discover that for yourself. And then also question the results. When you get those results, look them over and ask yourself, do these results reflect the real me? Because you may have a top strength that, yeah, I can see myself using that. I can see that I'm good at that. But what I really enjoy are these other 4 or 5. Be honest with yourself. And then look for ways you can infuse those more in your daily life, at work, in your personal life. How can you bring those strengths forward more often so that you'll experience greater fulfillment and joy in your daily life? So that's what I mean by being authentic. Now, can you, if you need to, bring other strengths forward to really succeed in your job? Yes, you can. Or to really, get along better with people in your personal life? Yes, you can. But the question should also be, how can I work in a space or live in a space where it's really feeding my spirit, where it's, it's bringing out the best in me. So I need to be assertive and creative, and I need to find ways to express the real me more often, no matter what I do. Does that make sense?
A lot of sense. And in the book, you talk about not only being yourself, but also understanding how important it is to serve. I remember one of your stories about going to an interview, a very important interview, and you were very nervous about it. And when you thought about how you could be, you could make a contribution to the audience, then everything changed. Can you talk can you tell us more about this inner coach and the inner critic, which you use so much in the approach?
Of course. So those are two topics, serving and being a contribution,
Right.
and then also tapping into your inner coach and your inner critic, but they're related, of course. So let's talk about your first comment, which was being a contribution first. And I do believe that that's a principle of effectiveness. It's not, we can be somewhat effective when we're thinking about what can I get out of this, what's in this for me. That can be somewhat motivating and effective, but because we are human beings and we thrive in the collective, really. I mean, if you look at our evolution, we are social beings and we've helped each other to thrive since the beginning of time, really. So, I do believe that we are wired to contribute. And I believe also that there's a higher law of contribution. So, it's not just, for selfish reasons, but for the collective, the greater good that, I contribute. And I believe that that's so motivating because when you stop and think about, okay, for example, the television show, and I think you have it in Brazil, Biggest Loser, where people try to lose weight, right?
Mhm.
And so that was a very, very popular show here in the United States for a long time. And I always found it interesting because, of course, coming from a psychology perspective, I'd watch that show. What really motivates people, and the people who lose the most weight? What was it that really push them over the line and help them to achieve those difficult goals? And what I noticed, it was the people who were doing it for a greater sense of meaning and purpose. It
Mhm.
was the people who were thinking about, I want to live longer and stay healthier so that I can be here longer for my children. And I can, contribute to them. I can help them over the years, and I can be a good role model to them. And hopefully they'll develop healthy habits. So it was when people transcended selfish concerns, just about how they looked, and considered more what they could give back, that they were really motivated to do the hard things, because these were people who were very overweight, and it was difficult. It was a challenge for them to lose that much weight. So I find that to be a principle of motivation, that sense of meaning and purpose, and going beyond just self and connecting to the greater collective. So that was the answer to your first question. And then you talked about inner coach and inner critic. And I think that it's really important to recognize that we all have, negative voices and positive voices that happen in our heads. I mean, we all have self-talk. As a matter of fact, Dr. Daniel Amen, who wrote the foreword to my most recent book, Authentic Resilience, he's the one that coined the phrase negative self-talk. He called them ants, automatic negative thoughts. And that's the acronym ANTS,
Mhm.
ANTS. And so he said, here's a man who is highly respected, who's written over 30 best-selling books about the brain.
Mhm.
And he clearly is teaching us that all of us have these thoughts that come into our heads, and yet we can influence those thoughts. But the research shows that we need to influence them very quickly. Usually within about a second, we have to be prepared with how we're going to deal with those negative thoughts in about a second, because that's how quickly our body cascades with negative chemicals once we've had a negative thought. So, my model, inner coach versus inner critic, aligns with that research. And I want people to understand quickly when they're having an inner critic thought, a negative thought, and also when they're having an affirming thought, which is the inner coach. And I want them to develop an awareness of that first, so that when they have those automatic negative thoughts, they have something ready to refute those automatic negative thoughts quickly. So the inner coach is always affirming, objective, positive. Even if we've done something wrong, it doesn't beat us up with reprimand. It doesn't, the inner coach always finds something we can learn from the experience, a way that we can grow from the experience. Whereas the inner critic is deflating, demoralizing, defeating type of language. And it's the downward spiral. The inner coach is the upward spiral.
Wow.
And I'm not teaching people to lie to themselves. I'm just teaching them to be more objective with themselves and look for the learning and the growth.
Yes, because you are based a lot on the science of positive psychology. Is that right? I think it's important to explain that it's not about a, let's say, artificial optimism. We're not talking about that, right? Trying to say that everything is right, that the world is marvelous, that we don't have a pandemic and other things like this, right? We do have it. We have to face problems every day. But what you have revealed in your coaching practices, in your teachings, is much deeper than just try to I would say, to reshape your thought, right? It's more than that. It's to understand in a deeper way how we work, how we react to environment. I think you could talk a little more about positive psychology to our audience and how you have, let's say, brought it to your book and to your courses.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, we're not in any way wanting people to stuff negative emotions, to avoid them, to run away from them. That's not the goal. But the goal is to develop the ability to undo negative emotions. So I love Dr. Barbara Fredrickson's work on the undoing effect of negative emotions. And there are many studies that are similar to this. So for example, they took university students and they separated them into two groups. One group was exposed to a lot of negativity. They were watched really negative, violent films and things like that. And read really negative literature. And then the other group was exposed to positivity. They watched uplifting films. They read really edifying stories. They listened to edifying music, that sort of thing. And then they gave them cognitive tests. And they found that the groups that were exposed to the positivity consistently outperformed the groups that were exposed to the negativity. So what does that tell us? They called it the broaden and build effect, that when you focus on positivity, it actually allows your brain to operate better. It allows you to remember information, to find connections and solutions.
To be more creative, right?
To be more creative. All of those capacities increase, and it's called the broaden and build theory. And when you're exposed to negativity, it's almost as though your brain starts to constrict. And so there are other studies as well that have shown that positive emotions have an undoing effect on negative emotions. So if we're experiencing a negative self-talk, a negative thought, it's really helpful for us to focus on, well, what do we have going for us? It's that simple gratitude journal, counting our blessings. I mean, it's as simple as that. Looking objectively at what we do have, to pull from to solve, the situation that we find ourselves in. And when we focus there, that grows, that area of focus grows. And the more we immerse ourselves in those, they're really objective, and they're also supportive, and they're encouraging thoughts. All of these all of these types of positive thoughts have an undoing effect on the negative ones. And I think that that's powerful, because we can't say, okay, I'm never going to think about this problem again. Let's say we're facing a problem. Let's say maybe somebody's worried about, how am I going to find a new job? They just lost their job, and they obsess about that and worry about that. So if we say, okay, I'm not going to think about that because that stresses me out, just saying I'm not going to think about being unemployed right now, you're probably going to obsess even more. When you say you don't want to think about something, it actually comes to your mind more.
I will not think about chocolate cake, right? That's
Exactly.
the exercise. And then you think more about it, right?
You notice it everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So instead of taking that approach, why don't we focus instead on, I'm going to find a job? Instead of saying, I'm so worried about not having a job, what if all of your energy and attention is toward, I'm going to find a job? What can I do to prepare myself for my next job? How can I research job opportunities? Who can I talk to about potential job opportunities? And then your focus becomes in the affirmative, rather than trying to get away from joblessness. You're moving towards something, and that's towards finding a job. So that's just one example of it's the shift from no to yes that I talk about in my book. Saying yes to what you do want and placing all of your attention there, instead of saying no to that chocolate cake. Because saying
Excellent.
no to the chocolate cake will just bring it to your awareness all the more.
Excellent. So Fátima, how has this book of yours, the first one, Authentic Strengths, being received in the United States since you have launched it? And who is the public? I would say, because we know you're doing great work in companies, training the training sector, but I know it's broader than that. I think this is an education, as education, right, in a broad sense. So I would like you to tell us a little more about how has been let's say the biography of the book. How has it been living out there?
So, thank you for asking that question, because sometimes there are little surprises. For example, just a couple of weeks ago, I got an email from a children's center in Washington State here in the United States. And it's a center for underprivileged children who live in the inner city. And so it's a nonprofit, and they tried to order a bunch of my books because they wanted to train their entire staff, and they said, you're sold out, there aren't enough, so can you ship direct to us? And in talking to them, we found out that they work with these little children, preschool age, and they wanted to train all of their staff in authentic strengths, so that when they work with the children and the parents, that they can bring those positive psychology principles to all of their interactions. They wanted to teach the children and the parents about inner coach, inner critic. They wanted to teach them about the undoing effect of positive emotions on negative emotions. All of the things we've been talking about, all of the strategies for solutions and creativity, and then also
reducing paranoia, I think, would be a great achievement among children and teenagers, right?
Exactly. And then they found out, oh, you've written a children's book also. So they've combined that. But they wanted to use authentic strengths to develop their staff first, because they understand that the oxygen mask that falls in the airplane needs to be placed on the person who's assisting others first. And they wanted to do that stress inoculation on themselves before they work with others. And I thought, wow, that's such a great approach. And I was thrilled to see that book being used.
But it's interesting, and we could maybe talk about the other end, to talk about CEOs and people who are really leading the way in society. Is it useful for them to? What kind of experiences have you been having with this different publics?
So I have worked with CEOs, and coaching, executive coaching. And the interesting thing, when you work with these high-powered individuals who are running, large companies, when the door closes, everyone becomes a very human being, right? When we start in, everyone has the same concerns and the same challenges. Often it's about relationships in their personal life and their professional life. It comes down to things that are very granular. How do I relate better to others? How do I motivate myself and others more? How do I create solutions? All of those things that everyone's interested in. And people become very honest and they share their challenges. And in my latest book, I write about one CEO that I worked with who had been in a terror attack. He was in that Brussels terror attack. And he came to me for coaching for other reasons, but we ended up talking about, that experience a lot. And because it was affecting him in his daily life, the need, he found that he had a need to forgive the attackers, that it was holding him back and that it was creating some issues for him in his life, holding on to those negative memories and essentially to some PTSD. And honestly, I think all of us who have just been through COVID have a certain level of PTSD over the last year. I mean, if you really are honest with yourself, all of us have been through immense stress
Yes.
over the past year.
Yes,
So,
I think your book is coming in a very strategic moment for the Brazilian population. We need to cultivate our own strengths because we're going through a very difficult moment. And of course, it's worldwide, but right here in Brazil, we have the index, the numbers of COVID are very high. So I think that it's as a blessing, and we're very grateful to you so that you have addressed the issue of how to develop our own strengths. Could you give maybe like a final message to the Brazilians about this? How could they develop their own strengths, their own authentic strengths, to be more thorough?
So I like to talk about it in terms of exploring, empowering, and engaging. I think that's a really simple way for people to really understand the power of character strengths. So first of all, be willing to spend the time and take the effort to explore yourself, to really go inward. And that's where your highest self resides. That's where your strength is. Getting to know yourself, exploring your strengths of character and how those have created, the use of those strengths has created success for you in the past. Because then you can learn how to recreate success going forward. So exploring your strengths and then empowering your goals with your strengths. Once you've understood what have been the elements of past successes for you, even if you're going through a rough time, a difficult time right now, you can recreate success. So how are you going to empower your goals with those strengths of character that we know are the things that really energize and motivate us? And there's a lot of information in the book about how to do that. And then lastly, how are you going to engage those strengths that are so motivating for you? How are you going to engage them consistently? And especially in relationship with other people, because none of us lives in a silo. And what we do does impact those around us. So explore, empower, engage. That would be my final, in our limited time, I guess,
Yes.
just some little nuggets of what I have found to be very helpful for me and those that I coach.
So Fatima, I know that your approach is very empowering for any individual, but you also has shown us how to, I would say, work collectively with strengths, right? So creating powerful teams. Can you explain us how does that approach work, because there are so many organizations trying to, empower and enhance their teamwork?
So there's a chapter in my book called Smart Swarm, which I believe you have translated as Bando Inteligente.
That's
And
right.
so when we're talking about this collective intelligence, we can look at nature. For example, when birds fly together, they don't bump into each other. They make room for each other. They share the lead. They draft off of each other, and they're always taking turns in helping the collective, right? So teams are like that. And one principle, I talk about teams a lot in that chapter in the book, but one principle that I think is really important is to appreciate strengths in one another. That's what raises a team to a higher level. When people feel that they're really seen for their best contributions, they're appreciated and valued, they're much more willing to bring more to the table. But also, I think that it's very important that leaders know how to appreciate in a meaningful and genuine way. I often, a leader will just go through the motions in appreciating their team members and not understand what is meaningful for each person on the team. So there is some finesse that we can learn from reading that chapter in the book about leading people and motivating people. And then also the interactions on the team. I mean, it's common knowledge that for any one negative interaction with another person, it often takes 5 positive interactions to neutralize and bring us back to where we were from in the beginning before we had that negative interaction, let alone moving beyond that to higher ground. So understanding these human dynamics and how to relate more effectively to one another. And then also how to unleash that collective intelligence within the team. And, there's a lot that we need to learn about creating psychological safety on our teams and not suppressing new ideas and innovation by creating a culture of, people are uncomfortable coming forward with new ideas because they might be, embarrassed in the process or shut down in the process. But how to create that team environment that's conducive to innovation. We talk about some of those strategies as well, when I teach that section of the book about teams. So there's a lot of information there that I think is helpful.
Excellent. It's a kind of a team building practice based on authentic strengths.
Correct.
Before you go, I just want to kind of synthesize here the writer, Fátima Doman, the writer. You have launched Authentic Strengths, and then you launched a book for kids, and then you launched a third book, which is about resilience, and now you're about to launch another one. Is that right?
Right.
How is it? What is the sequence, please?
Right. So first it was Authentic Strengths, and then it was True You, Authentic Strengths for Kids. Because I worked with schools and they said, we need something for the kids. So that's what drove that project. And then, especially during COVID, I wrote Authentic Resilience during COVID. And I felt that there was such a need for people to understand evidence-based approaches to resilience. What do we know from the research that really works? So that book came during 2020. And now in 2021, I'm very soon launching a book called Whole Life Well-Being. And it teaches about 7 essential elements to well-being. That's coming next. Very soon.
I'm passionate by all the subjects that you are developing. And in Caminhos Vida Integral, we are working with the whole being in a different way, because integral means that, integral life, right? And we are looking forward to, maybe launching your next book. Of course, we are late here. We're launching the first one in Portuguese, but this is just the beginning. We know that your message will reach the Brazilian public. We want to congratulate you again for the great job you're doing, the great writing and the great teachings that you're bringing to the world, and to tell you that this channel is always open for you. Okay, thank you, Fátima.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Luciano.